Hi everyone, today I bring you some quick tips to use for painting your exposed metal pieces and make them to look like real rusty parts for your scale models. When painting and weathering plastic kits, it's relatively common to find some parts which suffer heavy corrosion in the real vehicles. In my case, I have tried multiple techniques and materials for painting rusty effects in my models, and with the past of the years, I've come up with a simple but effective method that in my opinion works very well, and the most important, it is very easy and fast. This is Notjustpanzer and welcome to my hobby channel. Let's go for it! So today I will be painting the spare track links and the main exhaust piece of the 135th Panzer IV from Tamiya that I'm working with. All the links receive a nice coat of dark grey primer, and in my current way of representing rust effects, I like to start with a very dark base that will allow me to create faded effects. At the same time, it works as a shadow layer for the recessed areas. So for the first step, I like to use acrylic colors. When representing a nice rusty effect, it is very important to create a very hard looking surface and use some specific colors depending on the result you are looking for. So in this case I took 3 Vallejo acrylic colors: yellow ochre, clear orange for a higher saturation, and burnt red. The combination of these colors will create nice looking shades for representing standard rust effects. Orange tone will be the main base for all the different mixes, and the 2 other colors will act as some kind of darker and lighter shades. All of these mixes applied over the extremely dark surface will work really nice. You can see how I create the different color mixes, just mixing all the tones in a 50% ratio and getting a color variation from lighter shades of rust to some darker ones. So first, with these spare track links, I start creating some texture filling. Speckling different tones here and there will create an uneven coat made of very small dots that will represent this rough texture of corroded metals. In this moment, it's not crucial to get a high accurate texture. Just creating some little shapes on top of the dark base will work for this effect. Because acrylics dry very fast, they allow me to move quickly to the next step. Still using the same rust shades as before, I move now to the filtering technique. Using those acrylics in a heavy filter consistency, I apply to each individual link a different rust shade. My purpose here is to create some more definition by making each track link different. This will help us to identify better all the components of the some tracks. Also, creating some contrast using some lighter shades next to the darker ones becomes very useful. And this is the result after these 2 acrylic applications. In this case, and because these track links will be placed in the front armor of the model, I don't need to represent more detail or definition in their surface, because when put in place I will need to add some more dust effect to make everything more realistic. Just check how they look when compared with the main tank weathering effects applied until now. So nice, isn't it? Moving to the exhaust part, this is a bigger one and more representative of a corroded piece should be like. Here I will create a heavier rust effect. First, before painting, I pre-texture the piece with some Tamiya putty, just to save some time when painting. For this piece, I used exactly same colors and mixes as before. First, instead applying some more speckling, I decided to bring out some of that putty made texture by creating some chipping with the sponge, starting with a dark rust tone to be able to apply later some lighter rusty shades. Later, with some orange color, I apply some acrylic layers. I don't know how to describe it. It's not properly a wash, but it's not a filter neither. All in all, I try to distribute that filter, creating some random pattern, and moving the paint while it's still wet for creating an irregular paint coat. Just after that, I applied the same technique, but this time with a dark brown tone, just for applying to the darker areas some rust color related to it, that at the same time could act as a shadow tone. My next step was to take the lightest color using some yellow ochre with a little bit of orange and applying some chipping effect with the sponge over the raised details and main shapes of the exhaust. When dry, I blend the effect with a light orange color, again in a heavy filter consistency, trying to create some highlighting in the cylindrical piece which will improve the main shape of the exhaust piece. Mixing these 2 colors, I created a dark grey tone, not exactly an historical accurate Panzer grey tone, but it will work fine for giving some definition to the metal frames which hold the exhaust piece in place and which should be painted in a grey camouflage tone in the real vehicle. When painting these metal frames, I try to represent some weathering on the material by applying some grey traces with the brush. I also decided to apply some small chipping paint it by hand in the main piece of the exhaust. So now I've made all the main painting process with acrylics. I change now to enamels. I use this standard rust enamel effect from AK to apply some selective and flatter finish to the piece. I applied all over the piece, representing some rust dots in the surface, and because this product dries very matte, it will contrast very well with the previous acrylic work. These dots make the piece to look more complex and represents the effect of a heavy weathered and rusted pieces. For blending the effect, I use enamel thinner and a rounded brush. For this, I carefully blend each small dot, trying to leave the bigger amount of paint. At the same time, every dot gets completely blended and integrated in its final place. Applying also this enamel effect over the grey metal frames, as said before, will blend these spots and the result will not be so rough. Finally, taking some diluted sepia color, I try to apply a thin oil pin wash to the exhaust piece. Applying the wash in the recesses of the different parts will increase the contrast and definition of the main piece by creating some depth in the joints. And in some specific areas, I use this sepia color again for creating higher contrast, applying this dark brown color as some kind of very dark rust effect. And this is the final result. If you compare the piece with the beginning of the video, you can see how detailed and realistic looks now, and when it's put in place, it really looks like a real rusty and corroded exhaust piece from a tank. Using the good advantages of the acrylic paints allowed me to build an effect made of several coats overlap, and later, using enamels, I could make some final blending to take the piece to where I wanted. So summarizing, for me, it has taken some models to develop, in my opinion, this simple but effective rust effect workflow. All in all, this rust effects in these pieces just took me a couple hours in my workbench. Of course, depending on the final effect you want to create, you can modify this workflow, because this technique is flexible enough to represent some basic or more detailed rusty pieces. So I hope you found this video useful or at least interesting. Thanks for watching, and I see you in the next one.